Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. Today, my guest is going to take you on a journey. You will hear a powerful struggle victory story. I'm joined by Chris Schalleur, who is the CEO of CHRISTO IT. I met Chris a couple months ago at an EO event. EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. And let me tell you, Chris is the embodiment of what it means to be a true entrepreneur. Chris took his business from surviving to thriving through tremendous grit and perseverance. Today, CHRISTO IT is serving more clients regarding their IT needs than ever before. Let's dive in. Chris, welcome to the Stories of Traction podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
I appreciate your time, Chris. I know you're incredibly busy, so I really appreciate you spending time with us today. And I want to dive right in because a couple months ago, you shared a really powerful story with me about a moment in your business that wasn't exactly fun. I think often when we talk about entrepreneurship, especially when we're looking at social media, it really comes across that being an entrepreneur is glitz and glamour, and it's so much fun, and it's about strategy and conquering our dream and goal after goal. But you and I both know, and everyone listening, that entrepreneurship can be incredibly intense, incredibly challenging. And I really appreciated your vulnerability, and I really appreciate the story that you shared. So I want you to take us right back to that moment where things were not going well and how you reckoned with that.
We're an IT firm. We're based in Philadelphia, and we had done an acquisition, and we had gotten, I would say, maybe a little too big for our britches, or we had an air of, hey, we've got our poop in a group, or whatever it happens to be, and we said, oh, let's do an acquisition, and we bit off more than we can chew. And fast forward about a year, did everybody dive in? We culturally, we hey, everybody, rah, rah, so forth and so on. And we're about a year in after the acquisition went through, and everybody was here. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. We were losing clients. We were losing people. The stress, I can actually still taste the stress. If you want to get emotional there on that one, I can literally taste the iron in the blood as I'm like biting the inside of my cheeks, because it was palpable. Like we weren't getting any better, and we were losing really good clients and really good team members to the point of like shaking. And I had done multiple approaches with my team about how do we get our hands around this. I had done the underbelly approach, like, hey guys, come on, we're not doing this, that, or the other thing. I had done the screaming and ranting, over the top. I still don't like to do, but I do it every once in a while, and no movement, and it couldn't sleep. My wife and I still refer to it as those were the 3 bottle days. She was working for me at the time. She's now a project manager for Schneider, but we would grab a bottle when we got home, prepping dinner, and the kids were, smaller at the time, getting dinner together, and we'd crack another bottle, putting the kids to bed and everything like that. And I don't want to seem like an alcoholic, maybe, and then we'd look at each other after the kids went to bed and everything like that, and we'd say, all right, well, let's go back to work again. And, this is like 9:00 at night or something like that. And we'd crack the 3rd bottle and go do another 4 or 5 hours of work. And that was just over and over and over again. So I just want to set the stage on that. You mentioned the emotions. It was beyond tired, Matt. It was literally like a complete exhaustion. It was emotionally exhausted. Like I didn't have anything else for anything. On a Saturday at the kids' field hockey game or something like that, it was just glassy-eyed. I was there, but I wasn't experiencing anything else. I wasn't living anything else. It was just that. So it was intense. And the thing that really broke was we got to the end of the year and we were doing cost of living increases and, what are we going to do for the following year? And I lost it. I really just lost it. The revenue's going in the wrong direction. We're looking at increasing our expenses or our cost of goods sold with increasing salaries and this and that and the other thing. And what are we going to do here? There was just absolutely no give in the machine. And it wasn't like, well, if we get to June or whatever, if we get through this next quarter, we can make this happen or we can make this happen. Just it wasn't happening. And that despair, I guess, for really an oversimplification of the term, but that's really where we were.
Wow. So what was one way that you overcame that?
So the practicum, and we actually still have this in place today. The practicum that I would have is we had in case of break glass, and this is a horrible thing. But if you're in that dire straits, this is a horrible mechanism. But even if you're in good times, I highly recommend that you have this with your leadership team or your management team or something like that. And the in case of break glass is if this happens, what's the first thing to go? It could be a benefit. It could be a person, could be a nicety. It could be a marketing campaign that you have running currently. Whatever it happens to be, you should have that, unfortunately, very, very well black and white listed out in a and shared across the entire leadership team with, look, if revenue drops to here, we're going to enact this line item number 3. If revenue drops to here, or maybe not revenue, maybe it's margin or whatever your KPIs are. When this happens, this is what the result is going to be. What that did for us, it didn't prevent us from having unhappy conversations, but it prevented us from churning it over and over and over again, week to week. Like, all right, let's sit back down and what are we going to do next? We churned it all at once and prioritized the list. And then we had a clear direction moving forward of what were we going to do. And we still have it. Thankfully, everything's really going well for us and has been for a couple of years, but we still have that just in case. And it's my COO has it in her drawer, and it's an unfortunate thing, but I think it made for a very, very clear delineation around the entire management team, leadership team around what are we going to do next? What's the next plan?
Wow. I really like that. So I'm envisioning a ship, right? The ship is sinking, and basically as more and more water comes into the ship, certain things are going to be thrown off. But clearly you've made this incredibly successful today. So we're talking about as water's coming in, how did you patch those holes and how are you sailing now and helping more clients than ever before? Were there other strategies that you put into place to go from surviving to now thriving?
Yeah, great question. So 2 things that we did, we really got a handle on who's a good client for us. Not every dollar is created equal, especially for us. So we provide IT services to people, and we provide them at a flat rate for our clients so that they can just focus on doing whatever it is that happen to be law firms or CPA firms or things of that nature. That dollar of revenue comes with different expectations from the client. So we really dialed in on who's a good client for us and kind of painting that picture and then really going after just that type of client. So that really focused us on not trying to chase every single dollar in the tree. Let's go after this branch with this particular dollar. And so that was really item number 1. And item number 2, more recently, probably about 5 years ago, is we really started to focus in on the cybersecurity aspect of things. So because the nature of the world is changing, we basically eliminated the opt-in type of cybersecurity choices for our clients. We made everybody a compliance client. So everybody gets every protection that we can possibly provide. And we put the onus entirely on us as being the experts for our clients. That really helped us focus. Those 2 items really helped us focus in on how to then operationally, now that we have a particular client and we really only have one SKU to sell, because we don't have 8 different flavors of what we're providing. It helped us on the operations back end to really simplify what we need to provide. So it helped us with who we're going to hire. It helped us with the tool sets that we're going to need to get the job done, the visibility aspect of what KPIs are important to actually get things done. So those probably over the past 10 years, those were probably the 2 biggest changes that we made to focus us in on. I like to make a sale. You and I were talking briefly like about selling items and selling what value we provide to people. So not, the sale is great and that you come back with it. Hey, I got one, and it may not be, it's always a good thing to make more money, but it may muddy the water operationally, or it may not be the great benefit that you think it is to the whole operation entirely. So focusing in on that, for instance, we really focused in on billable firms for Philadelphia. So law firms, CPA firms, financial advisors, those are where we provide the best match of value to what their needs are and what value we provide. And we kind of really narrowed that field into who we're going after.
Sure. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And I definitely want to get to the cybersecurity piece in a moment, but I want to zoom in a little bit on who is a good client. So you mentioned, billable firms, CPA firms, law firms, but was there other specifics that you would say, hey, this is a really good client? Was it based on maybe the amount of time you're spending with the client? Maybe they hit certain parameters? What would be a couple of those points that you'd say this person appears like they'd be a really good client for what we do?
Well, all of those firms have expensive people. If they're there billing at X hundreds of dollars an hour and the laptop stops working, or the internet stops working, or the mechanism, or their law software, or their tax return software, or whatever it happens to be, stops operating, there's an instant translation to that client's billable, and that client's, their invoices stop flowing out the door, their revenue machine stops running. And it's an instant, this thing is producing dollars for us. And the person sitting in front of it needs to be as productive as possible to bill as much as possible. So we need the machine to work as much as 99.99999% of the time. Us being able to deliver that to people is an easier translation than not. The IT is a critical piece of what it is that they produce, whatever widget that they make. The IT infrastructure is a pivotal piece of that.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. And also it's very simplistic math at that point, right? Because if it's a law firm and they have 5 people working for them and they pay them X amount of dollars and they're down for 5 hours, here's how much they're looking to lose.
Cha-ching.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. So I want to dive into the cybersecurity aspect of this, because a lot of people listening, they may not find that a sexy topic, right? Something that is wowing or dazzles them, right? But it is something I think is really important to talk about, especially with AI technology, especially with a lot of individuals, unfortunately, out there that are harming businesses. So can you speak to the danger that you see right now and in the future regarding cybersecurity?
Sure. I'm fantastic at cocktail parties with, putting all this stuff together. It's wonderful stuff. But so what, people start going glassy-eyed if you start talking about the intricacies of cybersecurity, and it sometimes means different things to different people, and depending on what things you're protecting and all of that other fun stuff. But the first item that we usually tell people is, you need to understand what your risk is. What's at stake? And I actually defer to whoever your insurance carrier is. If most people have business E&O insurance, they have some sort of umbrella policy, they have some sort of protection protecting the LLC or the partnership or whatever entity that you have. You need to have a conversation with that person, a detailed conversation, not a 5-minute one-off, about what risks do I have. A lot of people are making assumptions that, well, I have an umbrella policy that'll cover me for any hacking that happens, any cyber incident or breach that happens, that'll cover me. That's a myth. and you should probably have a conversation with your insurance carrier about play the what if game. It's an awful game. If you want to lose sleep, play the what if game, and you'll lose sleep over it. But if this happens, what's covered? Or if somebody breaks into my files and this happens, what's my liability? What's covered by my policy? What are my responsibilities? And you got to play that what if game with your insurance provider a couple of times. And then after that conversation happens and maybe you're a little raw and maybe you now have a better understanding of what your risks are, then talk to your IT provider and say, okay, based on what my insurance provider said, I need to be able to cover these 5 types of scenarios. And now you can start having a more proactive conversation about what actually needs to be protected and a more of a risk conversation. Then I can talk about tools and ones and zeros and firewalls and all that other fun stuff all day long, but we really need to know what the risks are first. So that would probably be the first thing that I would recommend for everybody. And business owners are great on risk. They can typically, if they've been in business for a little while, they can feel it. And you're like, oh, okay, that one, no, I don't like that. You're really, if you're dealing with an insurance company, you're trading that risk for your premium. You're going to pay the premium for X number of dollars a month or X number of dollars a year. And you, Mr. Insurance Company, are going to take this risk from me. And having that understanding of what that transaction entails is really, really important. And then the things that are left over after you handed that risk over to the insurance company, now you need to know, all right, now I still have these pieces of risk over here. I can talk to my IT provider about protecting those pieces of risk.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate you mentioned that. What is at stake? So let's talk about some hypothetical, but I'm sure real scenarios. So let's create an entity just out of thin air, a law firm. And let's say this law firm has 10 different attorneys working in and out of the law firm. So clearly matches the billable firms that you had mentioned. Let's talk about some of what's at stake for them and some of the risks. So what is, based on your experience and based on some stories that you have witnessed yourself, what are some extreme things that can happen to that law firm based on cyber hacking?
Great scenario, Matt. I like that. You can do things like just basic business interruption. The firm goes down for whatever happened. Maybe somebody hit the power pole out front and you just now don't have power now and Pico says, maybe next Thursday. How about that? Does that work for you? Well, no, and you need to deal with that type of situation, and that could be something that's not malicious in any way, shape, or form, but it's just you're just not operating. So you can go from that extreme all the way to you've walked in and now all of your computer screens are red and somebody's asking you for some sort of ransom dollars, and we're not going to give you your data back or the operations of your machines back until you provide us X number of Bitcoin or something along those lines. There's loss of reputation. There's going to be some disclosures, like if a breach happens and they get access to your client files, at what point do you have to disclose that publicly? There's going to be some loss of income over just being able to communicate with your different clients and saying, this is what happened. And there could be physical payments involved with that, or some sort of responsibility on your part to pay credit protection for those clients for X number of years. You may have seen some of those things happen with the credit agencies over the past couple of years. Experian got hacked and Transamerican got hacked, and so it's different things of that nature. So there could be some hard costs on this as well. There could be suits filed against you. So some of this has to do with, and this would be a great thing for pretend entity that we've created. When you are creating your engagement letter with that law firm's client now, what are you on the line for? What have you promised to that client? That's a really good thing to examine and make sure that it doesn't have to be pages and pages, but if you're a law firm and we're getting handed tax records and medical records and XYZ, all of this honeypot of information, social security numbers and medical IDs and all of this other fun stuff. What are you promising to that client who's handing you all of this information to protect it? And you should make sure that you get that really, really nailed down. And then secondly, I probably would make a priority having a written information security plan. So this would be taking maybe that paragraph or couple paragraphs in your engagement letter and fleshing it out. How do we protect things? How do we train people? Because the people are the biggest part of this, Matt. I mean, it's the cybersecurity. We talked about the tools and the ones and the zeros and firewalls, but you got the eternal diligence of training your people, because they're the ones who are touching the documents and the emails and clicking on links and stuff like that. Are you training all of your people and consistently training them? And actually, funny enough, that's probably the number one change in all of these cyber insurance applications over the past 5 years. Is the number one thing that they've all added now is that continuing education for employees. That's become the people who are eating that risk for the premiums, that they've identified that as probably the number one thing that needs to be addressed in whoever's applying for the insurance.
Wow. What do you think of something that a lot of people, so think of team members, employees, something that a lot of people regularly do, but could create vulnerabilities to cyber hacking? Can you think of anything in particular?
Probably a lot of people use Office 365. It's probably the majority of the firms out there and everything like that. And most of them out there need some sort of protection around the email. And if I were to email you a document, or maybe a link to some sort of resource online or something along those lines, Microsoft has a thing called Advanced Threat Protection, and it's an easy checkbox. It might cost you an extra $1 a month or something along those lines, but it's an easy protection where they'll open up that email out in cyberspace and check that attachment, that Word document attachment, and they'll check that link that's in the email to make sure that nothing malicious is getting through before it finally delivers to you. And it takes a half second. You don't even notice it. It's one of the easiest things that you can do to prevent the oh no, I thought it was a screensaver or whatever, and I clicked, and now you're dealing with an incident, a cyber incident.
Yeah, as you know, I feel like that's going to become more and more prevalent with AI and being able to clone people virtually. So you
mentioned the AI earlier, yeah. And that is now a new in the written information security plans that we help our clients put together. That is now a new section. So it always had a section in there for business use policy. So if you have a company issued laptop or a cell phone or whatever, you need to use that only for business purposes. So one of the newest sections that we're adding now is, how do you use AI? What are you allowed to use AI for in your organization? That needs to be pushed down from top above. So the management of this fake 10-person LLC that we made, the partners of the firm need to decide what is acceptable use of AI. What are we going to allow AI to do in our organization? And that needs to be professed and told across the entire organization to make sure that everybody's very consistent on that. And that actually just started this past year, and it's really been something that everybody needs to focus on.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because right now it's the wild, wild west. There's, as you know, many companies, they don't even know what they're doing, right? Because it's so new. So they're getting this AI tool and this AI app and doing this and that. So I'm guessing there's going to be even more and more of a need for cybersecurity based on the AI piece. Are there certain concerns that you see just in the next few years as it pertains to AI, with being able to clone people, being able to really send out scams that look incredibly real?
Very real. And it actually happened a few months back. It made the nightly news, so you knew it was a big one. In South Korea, there was a larger organization, several thousand people, but they had the controller of the organization got a request for a meeting. Please jump on this meeting now. Okay. And it came from one of the directors of the organization. And he clicked on it and he joined the conference call already in progress, similar to what we're doing here, where there's pictures of people all around. And this is the board of directors, Mr. Controller, we need you to move this money from over to here. The board has made an approval of X, Y, Z, so forth and so on. And we need you to move this money over here, and please do this while we're on the call. And all in favor, aye. And he moved $25 million. All of the windows, all of the people were all fake. So It was all AI generated. It was an AI generated conference call. And I actually don't know the resolution of this. This happened several months ago. I don't know if they actually got the money back or not, or what happened on that. I know there was some severe investigations going on this, but this was a very, very targeted attack using AI and video generated. That's probably the most prevalent, and that made 60 Minutes in the nightly news and everything like that. But that's the most prevalent use, and that's now. And I can tell you, it's probably leapfrogged 5 iterations of technology since that happened, as far as audio quality, video quality, interaction, being able to interact with that personality. I don't even know what the fake person or whatever it happens to be. But it's going to be scary. So one of the things that we're going to need to work on is I don't have a better analogy than this, Matt, but we're going to need to come up with a real life 2-factor authentication. So when you walk up to the ATM machine and you type in your code and you put your card in, you have something that some sort of password, and you have your card, something physical in your hand. And people are familiar with, your phone, you do whatever, and I type in a password and then I have a 2-factor authentication. But on security types of conversations, you're going to need to have some sort of verification method. Hey, I just give me your secure code. And it's going to be something where I know I'm talking on the phone with Matt, and Matt knows he's talking on the phone with Chris. It's going to be super awkward socially. It's going to be something that we're not ready for as a species, I don't think. But it's going to become so needed so quickly. It's going to be one of the most quickly adopted things out there. You're going to have whatever mechanism it is, some sort of two-factor thing, Bitcoin thing, whatever, but it's going to be absolutely unique to you, and it's going to be something that's tied to either you or something that or something on your phone or whatever it happens to be. And that's going to be needed because you're not going to know who you're talking to.
Do you foresee that happening on a business-to-business case? Would this be a government entity doing this? How do you foresee the organization of that taking place?
Probably the way most things work is there's going to be a proliferation of 800 of them very, very quickly. There'll be some sort of freemium type versions of it. Eventually, people are going to recognize the value of it. Some companies are going to start to charge for it. It will whittle down to 10 actual things that are actually doing it. There'll be some sort of standardization on that. The government will get involved in what that standardization entails. And then I'm a full believer in the privatization of things and try to minimize the government involvement. So I think it'll probably wind up like you have certain 2FA factors out there like Okta and Duo and things of that nature. It'll fall into line with that, where you have a number of entities, and maybe those already existing 2FA type things will be the mechanism, and they'll have to add the functionality of what's my personal ID code right now, and some sort of auto generated code or whatever, or maybe you pop up on a screen and here's your QR code and it validates your QR code to my QR code. And I'm making this up as we go right now, Matt, but it's going to be something that we're going to have to some sort of validation, because we're not going to be able to trust what's in front of our eyes anymore.
Sure. No, I could absolutely see that taking place for sure, especially at the speed that this is being rolled out. Is there anything specific that you could think of that a company could do right now if they're feeling uneasy about something? So, the scenario that you painted, this virtual call, and it looks so real. If someone listening is getting to a situation for whatever reason, they might think that it's AI, what's something that they can do right away for like a verification type method?
Great question. So back to that written information security plan. One of the items in there should be, what's the process for moving money? If it's wire transfers, or how do you write a check? How do you do whatever? Who has access to that? And you don't have to go super ultra secret double probation kind of thing. You don't have to go extreme on it, but here's the 4 people that have access to that. All 4 people know exactly what the procedure is. There's some sort of coding, or we need both Jessica and Bill on the call in order to do this. And Jessica and Bill are going to have their own passphrases that they use, and those are going to get changed every 3 months. Again, I'm kind of coming up with this on the fly, but the important thing is that you've thought this, you've done the what if scenario. When we need to make a wire, and some companies, they're doing 10 wire transfers a day, and they should have this pretty nailed down, but other companies may only be doing this once a year or something along those lines. So you really kind of need to ascertain your risk again. Whenever you're touching the money, whenever you're touching something tangible as far as dollars and cents are concerned, what's the process for that? Who has access to it? What's the checks and balances on that? Hey, you know what? Even when Bill and Kathy say yes and they've turned their key, we still need to call the bank and talk to Charlie at the bank and get his key code as well, or whatever it happens to be, to make sure that you're kind of lining that up and proceduralizing. The first thing is protect the money. The second thing would be, then you could work outwards from there as far as, I don't know, data transfers or anything like that.
Yeah, I really appreciate you mentioning that, because, everyone listening, how challenging it can be for us to really bring our goals, our dreams to fruition. And there are people listening to this episode that they've worked decades to build their companies to where it is. And it's amazing how quickly that could be lost due to a security breach. So I know it's not always fun to talk about, but I really appreciate you sharing this with us today, Chris. And I really appreciate all the different things that you shared. I got 3 specific points that I'm going to remember after this conversation. The very first one is, I really appreciate what you said, in case of break glass, in case of blank, break glass. And I appreciate you mentioning having a plan together, a written plan, not hope. Hope's not a strategy, having a written plan of what is the first thing to go. I really appreciate that point. The second point is, I appreciate you mentioning who is a good client. There are so many people that they might understand the importance of that, but they might not have actually sat down and spent time really thinking about who is a good client and willing to give up some clients. I think that's really important and very powerful from just so many different levels, but I think it's really important. Who is a good client? And then the third and final piece is the plan piece, asking what is at stake and really figuring out the risk factor. You mentioned from power outages to red screens. And then you talked about having a plan regarding AI. And part of that plan needs to be, what's the process for moving money? In fact, I recommend everyone that's listening to this podcast, one of the first action items, once you're done listening, is you need to immediately figure out what is your plan for moving money, period. So you don't get in a situation similar to what Chris mentioned today. So thank you for all of that, Chris. I really appreciate it. If someone wants to get more information on what you do, they want to reach out to you for cybersecurity services, where's the best place they can go to get that information?
CHRISTOIT.com. Celebrating 25 years so we're doing something okay. We got a really great team over here, and we handle the Philadelphia area.
Perfect. I will include that in the show notes. People could just click and go from there. Chris, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.